The ridge
Moving to
wasn't
the
lost
south
in a
entrance.
firefight. It was lost in a sentence. Fall back, we can't hold it. The order came through calm and final.
All
The
units,
kind
this
of
is
voice that
Overwatch.
had already moved
Sector
past the
Charlie is
decision
green.
and into
I
the next
repeat,
problem.
Sector Charlie is green.
Staff Sergeant
Move to the
Maya Reeves
extraction
heard
point.
every word through her headset, crystal clear despite the wind tearing across the exposed rock face. Below her position, soldiers turned downhill. Rifles lowered, shoulders sagged with the particular exhaustion that comes not from running out of strength, but from running out of time. She watched them through her scope. 40 men and women who had held this ground for 36 hours without sleep, without hot food, without anything except the belief that someone above them knew what they were doing. The scope's reticle drifted across faces streaked with dust and dried sweat. Young faces, the kind that still believed orders made sense. Maya's finger rested outside the trigger guard. Not yet, she was still calculating. The ridge had a name on the map, Ridge 437, but no one used it anymore. Everyone just called it high ground, like that alone explained why so many had already died trying to keep it. The narrow approach path below looked deceptively simple from up here, a ribbon of pale stone winding between dark rock formations. Those formations looked solid until you tried to use them as cover. Then they became corridors, funnels, kill zones if you misjudged by even a meter. The enemy knew it too. That was the problem. Maya shifted her weight slightly, feeling the stone bite into her ribs through her gear. The wind slid across the ridge in waves, tugging at her sleeve, whispering across the barrel of her rifle. She had learned to read wind the way some people read faces. This wind was steady, left to right, patient, honest in its way. Her radio crackled again. Sniper 1 acknowledged fallback. She didn't respond. Not yet. Her right hand moved without conscious thought, fingers brushing the face of the watch strapped to her left wrist. The metal was warm from her skin, worn smooth at the edges from 24 years of handling. The inscription on the back was too faded to read anymore, but she didn't need to read it. She had memorized those words when she was 4 years old, tracing them with small fingers while her father smiled. Do the math even when they tell you to stop. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Reeves had left her that watch. Nothing else. No letters, no final words recorded on video, no deathbed wisdom. Just a watch with an inscription and a promise that had taken her 2 decades to understand. Maya blinked hard, forcing her vision to clear. Below, the platoon was halfway through the withdrawal, professional, controlled, no panic. They had trained for this, the disciplined retreat under pressure. But training scenarios didn't account for the kind of pressure Maya could see building in the rocks to the east. Movement there, careful, patient, waiting. She counted positions, 7, no, 8. Enemy observers settling into overwatch, tracking every step of the withdrawal. They weren't shooting yet because they didn't need to. They were letting gravity and exhaustion do the work, waiting for the moment when the retreating line would cross the invisible threshold where cover disappeared and exposure became fatal. Her jaw tightened. The math was simple, brutal but simple. If the platoon continued at current pace along current route, 60% casualties within 8 minutes. 70% if enemy reinforcements were already moving into flanking positions, which they almost certainly were. She could stop it. 4 shots, maybe 5. Disrupt the observation posts. Buy time, scatter the coordination. But that would mean disobeying a direct order. Maya closed her eyes for just a moment, and suddenly she wasn't on Ridge 437 anymore. Fallujah, Iraq, November 2004. The heat was different there. Not the thin mountain cold of the ridge, but thick, wet heat that clung to everything. Turned uniforms into second skins, made every breath feel borrowed. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Reeves crouched behind a low wall, studying a tablet showing thermal imagery of the building complex ahead. Maya wasn't there. She was 4 years old, half a world away, sleeping in her bed in North Carolina. But she would hear the story later, pieced together from after-action reports in the words of soldiers who came to her mother's house and sat at the kitchen table and told the truth when they thought Maya wasn't listening. The building looked empty on thermal. No heat signatures, no movement. Intel from Colonel Sarah Chen's headquarters had marked it clear to advance, critical to advance, timeline dependent on advance. Michael Reeves studied the screen and felt his gut twist. The numbers didn't match. Ambient temperature too high for an empty building. No civilian movement in surrounding blocks, which meant locals knew something. Small details, the kind that got ignored when timelines mattered more than caution. He keyed his radio. Ma'am, request 30 minutes for secondary reconnaissance. The response came back immediate, professional, final. Negative. Timeline is critical. You have green light to proceed. Michael looked at his senior enlisted gunnery sergeant Patricia Vance. She was the only female sniper in the battalion, a quiet woman with steady hands and eyes that missed nothing. She was reading his face, not the tablet. Sir, Vance said quietly, I trust your gut. Let me scout first. And there it was. The moment. The equation with too many variables and not enough time. Michael Reeves was 35 years old, West Point graduate, 2 previous deployments, a wife and a daughter waiting at home. He had been trained his entire adult life to follow orders, to trust the chain of command, to believe that colonels had better information than lieutenant colonels, that the system worked even when it felt wrong. He also knew that if he delayed, if he pushed back, if he second-guessed, the blame would roll downhill. It always did, and Patricia Vance was the lowest rank in this conversation. Female, expendable, in the eyes of people who made those calculations. He couldn't let that happen. Michael straightened. Check your gear. We're moving in 2 minutes. Vance's face went still. Sir? That was all she said. Sir, not an argument, not a protest. Just acknowledgement that she had heard, had understood, and would comply. They moved in 90 seconds. The ambush killed 12 soldiers in the first 30 seconds. The rest of the firefight lasted 4 hours. Michael Reeves took 3 rounds to the chest and 1 to the throat. He died in a field hospital 16 hours later, conscious for most of it, drowning in his own blood while doctors who had run out of miracles held his hands. Patricia Vance was there. She held his left hand. She was covered in other people's blood, her own shoulder bandaged where shrapnel had torn through body armor. She didn't cry, couldn't. Shock had frozen everything except her ability to hear. Michael's voice was a wet whisper. Tell Maya. Vance leaned closer. Sir? Tell Maya the equation was right. I was wrong to ignore it. Michael's eyes were unfocused, looking past Vance at something she couldn't see. His grip tightened with surprising strength. Tell her. Finish what I couldn't. Those were his last words. 3 minutes later, his hand went slack, and Patricia Vance was holding a corpse. She looked up and saw Colonel Sarah Chen standing in the doorway of the medical tent. Chen was perfectly clean, uniform pressed, not a single streak of dust. She stood there for perhaps 5 seconds, her face showing something that might have been grief, or might have been guilt, or might have been nothing at all. Then she turned and walked away. Vance sat there holding a dead man's hand and understood with perfect clarity that she had just watched truth die along with him. Where? Maya opened her eyes, the ridge snapped back into focus. Wind, stone, sky, the present. Her radio crackled. Sniper 1, acknowledge, fall back. This is your final warning. She didn't answer. Below, one soldier stumbled on loose gravel and caught himself at the last second. Another reached out, steadying him. 2 seconds too long in the open. 2 seconds of exposure that could have been fatal if the enemy had been ready to shoot. They weren't. Not yet. They were still positioning, still patient. Maya's scope settled on the lead observer. 800 meters. Difficult shot, but clean. Wind steady. Angle steep, but manageable. One shot would collapse their entire observation network. Force them to reposition. By the platoon, 6 minutes, maybe 8. But it would also reveal her position. Contradict command. Make her the one variable that didn't fit the equation command had already solved. Her finger moved to the trigger guard. Not inside, just resting there, feeling the metal. She thought about her father, about the choice he had made in Fallujah, about the 12 soldiers who died because he followed orders he knew were wrong. She thought about Patricia Vance, who had become Maya's primary instructor 8 years ago at Scout Sniper School and had never once mentioned Fallujah until Maya had earned the right to hear it. She thought about the watch on her wrist. Do the math, even when they tell you to stop. Her father had done the math. He had known the answer, and then he had ignored it because he believed in the system more than he believed in himself. It had killed him. It had killed 11 others. It had killed the truth. Maya's breathing slowed. Her heartbeat settled into the rhythm she had trained for years to achieve. The world narrowed. Distance, angle, wind, time, and one more variable her father had never solved. The moral cost of obedience. She reached into her vest pocket and pulled out a small notebook. Battered green canvas, edges frayed from years of handling. It had belonged to her father. She had found it in a box of his effects when she was 16, hidden beneath dress uniforms her mother couldn't bear to look at. Most of the pages were filled with technical notes, range calculations, wind charts, ammunition performance data, the handwriting of a man who thought in numbers and trusted math more than feelings. But the last page was different. Fallujah equation, unfinished. Beneath that, variables listed in her father's precise script. Enemy position, X civilian casualties, Y intel reliability, Z time, T moral cost of obedience, M price of one life versus many, P. The last two variables had no values, just question marks. Her father had written them the night before he died. Maya had studied this page for 12 years, trying to understand what he had been calculating. She understood now. He had been trying to solve the equation that would have saved his life. The formula that would have told him when disobedience was not just acceptable, but morally required. He had run out of time before he found the answer. Maya pulled a pencil from her pocket. Her hands were completely steady. She wrote next to the variables. M equals 0 soldiers lost. P equals 1 career, but 40 families intact. She added one more line at the bottom. Some equations take 2 generations to solve. Then she closed the notebook and put it away. Her scope found the enemy observer again. Still there, still tracking, still patient. Maya's finger slipped inside the trigger guard. She exhaled halfway and held it. The reticle steadied. The world compressed into a single point of certainty. Below, a corporal named Jimmy Torres looked up at the ridge, searching for something he couldn't name. He was 23 years old. His sister had served with Maya Reeves 2 years ago in a different war, a different mountain. His sister had told him stories about a sniper who never left position early, who calculated trajectories in her head, who once held an entire valley for 6 hours with 14 rounds because the math said it was possible. Jimmy didn't know if those stories were true. He was about to find out. Maya squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked back into her shoulder with familiar force. The sound cracked across the ridge, sharp and immediate, echoing in the thin air like a declaration. Through the scope, she saw the enemy observer's head snap back. He dropped. Clean. Final. For a split second, everything froze. Below, soldiers stopped mid-step. One dropped instinctively to a knee. Another spun, looking straight up at the ridge with wide eyes, mouth open in a question that had no immediate answer. Then chaos. Her radio exploded with overlapping voices. Contact, contact, sniper fire from the ridge. Multiple units transmitting at once. Some panicked, some professional, all confused. And then a single voice cut through, female, older, sharp with authority and something else. Something that sounded almost like recognition. Who fired that shot? Maya was already moving, rolling away from the firing position, dragging the rifle close, sliding into the narrow rock seam she had memorized 3 hours ago when she first took position. Gravel bit into her gloves. Wind tore at her breath. She reached her secondary position, just as return fire hammered the stone she had occupied 5 seconds earlier. Too late, too slow, but not finished. She chambered another round. Her heart was hammering now, not from fear but from acceleration. Everything had changed. The ridge was no longer abandoned. It was contested again. Because of her. Below, the platoon was frozen between retreat and defense, half turned back toward cover, half still moving downhill. No one knew what to do because this wasn't in the training. This was the moment when an order got reversed not by command, but by consequence. Her radio crackled again. Who is firing from the ridge? That position was cleared. Confirm friendly sniper. Confirm. The voice was Colonel Sarah Chen. Maya recognized it from briefings, from formal addresses, from the official memorials where Chen gave speeches about sacrifice and duty and the proud tradition of service. Maya had never spoken directly to Colonel Chen. She was about to, but not yet. First, she had to check her work, verify the equation, make sure the math held. She scanned the eastern rocks through her scope. The enemy observation posts were in chaos. 2 were falling back. 3 were trying to reposition. The coordination had shattered. The careful patience was gone. Below, the platoon was using the confusion. A sergeant was barking orders. The withdrawal was resuming, but faster now, more aggressive. They were taking advantage of the disruption. The math was working. Maya's scope found another target, an enemy fighter moving too quickly, exposed by urgency. She tracked him for 3 seconds, let him commit to his path, then fired. The body fell. Immediate response fire hammered her position from 2 directions. She was already gone, scrambling across loose stone to her tertiary fallback. A round cracked overhead. Another struck rock close enough to spray her face with grit. Her radio lit up again. That same voice. Harder now. Controlled, but barely. Sniper 1, this is Lieutenant Colonel Chen. Cease fire immediately. That is a direct order. Maya reached her third position, wedged herself into a gap between two slabs of granite. She keyed her radio once. Just once. Negative. One word. Calm. Flat. Final. Silence followed. The kind that only happens when everyone on the net realizes something has shifted beyond recall. Maya didn't wait for a response. She was scanning again, looking for the next threat, the next variable that would change the equation. What she found made her breath catch. Movement in the rocks. Not random. Coordinated. A team advancing with too much confidence, too much knowledge of the terrain. They were moving like they had rehearsed this, like they knew exactly where the blind spots were. That shouldn't be possible. Unless someone had told them. Maya's mind raced. Enemy scouts couldn't have mapped this ridge that thoroughly in 36 hours. The platoon had been rotating positions, changing patterns. No consistent intel could have been gathered, which meant the intel had come from somewhere else. Her scope tracked the advancing team. 5 fighters, moving with the discipline of people who had been trained by professionals. Western trained. She felt cold settle into her chest. Her radio crackled with a new voice. Male, younger, uncertain. Sniper 1, this is Bravo lead. If you can hear me, we're moving to secondary rally point. We've got 8 wounded. If you're buying us time up there, we need 4 more minutes. Captain Derek Harrison. Maya had met him once briefly at a forward operating base 3 months ago. He had seemed competent, professional, the kind of officer who followed doctrine because doctrine usually worked. He was asking her for time. 4 minutes. Maya checked her magazine. 11 rounds left. She had started with 25. 14 rounds to buy 4 minutes. The math worked. Barely. She keyed her radio. 4 minutes. Then I'm gone. Roger that. And Reeves? Harrison's voice hesitated. Thank you. Maya didn't respond. She was already lining up her next shot. The advancing enemy team was closer now. 300 meters. Too close for comfort, but still manageable. She picked the lead fighter, fired. The shot was clean. The body dropped. The other 4 scattered immediately, diving for cover. Good instincts. But they had scattered in predictable directions, following training that assumed professional opposition. Maya wasn't following any training they knew. She fired twice more in rapid succession. Not at the fighters, but at the rocks above them. Ricochets, unpredictable, terrifying. The kind of fire that said the shooter didn't care about conserving ammunition, which meant they had plenty. She didn't, but they didn't know that. The enemy team went to ground, stopped advancing, started a slower, more cautious approach. That bought 90 seconds. Maya used it to relocate again. This position was temporary. A shelf of rock barely wide enough for her body. No protection from above. If they got artillery or mortars working, she was finished. But artillery took time to coordinate. Mortars needed spotters. She had maybe 10 minutes before that became a problem. Her radio crackled again. That same female voice. Harder now. Not asking. Sniper 1, this is Lieutenant Colonel Chen. You are out of position and out of authorization. Your actions are compromising extraction timelines. Maya almost laughed. Extraction timelines, like this was a logistics problem. Like the equation was about schedules instead of lives. She keyed her radio. Colonel, enemy has overwatch on primary extraction road. Thermal tracking confirmed. They were waiting for the platoon to reach kill zone at grid reference 7743. Silence. Long enough that Maya wondered if Chen had muted her radio. Then quieter. How do you know that? Because I'm watching them watch us. And they're too well positioned to be random. Someone gave them our route. Maya heard something in the background. Voices. Commands. Chen talking to someone off radio. When Chen came back, her voice was different. Still professional. Still controlled. But with an edge of something else. Something that might have been respect or might have been fear. Stand by, Sniper 1. Maya didn't stand by. She was tracking new movement. 2 more fighters. These ones carrying equipment that looked wrong. Too bulky. Too technical. Her scope couldn't resolve details at this range, but she didn't need details. She knew what surveillance gear looked like. They were setting up to track the platoon's thermal signatures. If they got that gear online, every soldier below would light up like a beacon. The withdrawal would turn into a shooting gallery. Maya checked her ammunition. 9 rounds. She needed 3 for the surveillance team. That left 6 for everything else that was about to happen. The math was getting complicated. Her radio crackled. New voice. Older. Male. familiar in a way that made her chest tight. Maya, this is Bull. I'm tracking you. Master Sergeant William Hendricks. Bull to everyone who knew him. 55 years old, senior scout sniper instructor. The man who had trained Maya, the man who had known her father. The man who had survived Fallujah because Michael Reeves had carried him out of the kill zone and then gone back for others. Bull wasn't supposed to be on this operation. He was stationed at Quantico, training the next generation, which meant he had patched into the command net unofficially, without authorization, because he had heard what was happening and couldn't stay silent. Maya felt something unclench in her chest. Bull, they're ordering me to stand down. I know, just like they ordered your father. What does the math say? Maya looked down at the platoon. They were 3 minutes into their 4-minute window. Moving fast, carrying wounded, trying to believe they would make it. Math says I stay. Then you know what to do. Bull's voice was steady, certain. Finish his equation. Maya didn't answer. She was already lining up her shot. The surveillance team was setting up their equipment. 200 meters, difficult angle. Wind had shifted, coming in gusts now instead of steady. She would have to time it between gusts, fire the moment the air went still. She waited, breathing shallow, finger on the trigger, feeling the rhythm of the wind. Still, she fired. The round took the first operator in the shoulder. Not fatal, but devastating. The man spun and went down, taking the surveillance rig with him. The second operator grabbed for the equipment. Maya fired again. This shot hit the equipment itself. Electronics sparked. The operator dove away. 7 rounds left. Return fire came from 4 directions at once. Heavy, sustained. They had her general position now. The rock around her started coming apart, chips and dust filling the air. A round punched through her pack, shredding fabric. Maya rolled out of position and slid down a steep grade, controlling her fall with her boots and her left hand. Rifle clutched to her chest with her right. She hit the bottom hard enough to drive the air from her lungs. She lay there for 3 seconds, vision swimming, lungs burning. Then she heard Bull's voice again, quieter now, almost gentle. Maya, they're cutting me out. General just relieved me for unauthorized communication. I won't be able to talk to you again. Maya keyed her radio. Bull, listen to me. Your father would be proud. Not because you're brave, because you're right. The radio went dead. Maya stared at it for a moment, feeling something cold and final settle over her. She was alone now. No mentor, no support, just her and the ridge and the equation that her father had died trying to solve. She checked her position. New location, lower on the ridge than before. Less visibility, but better cover. She could see the platoon from here. They were almost clear. Maybe 90 seconds from relative safety. 90 seconds. 7 rounds. The math still worked. Maya settled into firing position. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was controlled. Everything she had trained for was crystallizing into this moment. She found a target. Fired. The body dropped. 6 rounds. Another target. Fired. Another body. 5 rounds. The enemy was adapting, learning. They were moving in teams now, covering each other, using terrain better. Professional, disciplined. Maya adjusted. She stopped targeting individuals and started targeting movement, firing into likely positions, forcing hesitation, making them second guess. 4 rounds left. Her radio crackled one more time. That female voice, Colonel Sarah Chen, but different now, stripped of command authority. Just a woman talking to another woman. Staff Sergeant Reeves, I know who you are. Maya didn't respond. She was scanning for targets. I was your father's executive officer in Fallujah. That made Maya pause. Her finger eased off the trigger. Chen continued. I pushed him to advance. The intel was bad. I knew it might be bad, but I followed orders from above and I pushed him anyway. Maya's jaw clenched. She keyed her soinium. Why are you telling me this? Because you're doing what he should have done. You're trusting the math instead of the orders. And I need you to know something. Maya waited. I've lived 24 years with his death. Please don't make me live with yours too. Maya looked down at the platoon. They were clear, out of immediate danger, moving into terrain that would cover their withdrawal. The equation was solved. She had bought them the time they needed. Now she just had to survive what came next. Maya keyed her radio one last time. Then help me, Colonel, like you couldn't help him. Silence, 5 seconds, 10. Then Chen's voice came back, quiet but certain. You have 10 minutes before airstrike, not as your commanding officer, as the woman who owes your father a debt. 10 minutes. Maya looked at her rifle. 4 rounds, 4 minutes of ammunition at best. 10 minutes to cross terrain that would take 15 under ideal conditions. The math didn't work anymore. But Maya had learned something her father never had. Some equations couldn't be solved with numbers. Some problems required different variables. Variables like faith, like sacrifice, like the belief that doing the right thing mattered even when the numbers said you would die for it. She slung her rifle and started moving. Behind her, the ridge was silent. The wind had died. The gunfire had stopped. Ahead of her, 10 minutes of impossible terrain and the certainty that what she had started here would follow her for the rest of her life, however long that turned out to be. Maya ran, and with every step she felt the weight of her father's watch against her wrist. The inscription she couldn't read anymore, but would never forget. Do the math even when they tell you to stop. She had done the math. Now she would find out if the answer was worth the price. 10 minutes wasn't enough time to cross the ridge and reach safety. Maya knew this the moment Colonel Chen spoke the words. She had mapped every route during her initial reconnaissance. The fastest descent required 12 minutes under optimal conditions. Running, no equipment, perfect footing. She had equipment. The footing was loose stone and ice, and optimal had died the moment she fired that first shot. But 10 minutes was what she had, so she ran anyway. The terrain fell away in steep shelves, each drop just high enough to jar her knees, just loose enough to threaten her balance. Her boots hit gravel and slid. She caught herself with her left hand, kept moving. The rifle banged against her back. Her pack was lighter now, shredded by enemy fire. Half her gear scattered across the ridge behind her. She didn't need it anymore. All she needed was speed and luck and the thin hope that Colonel Sarah Chen was being honest about those 10 minutes. Her radio crackled. Static. Then a voice cut through, not Chen this time, male, clipped. Authority that expected instant obedience. All units, this is Teok Actual. Be advised, airstrike is inbound. 8 minutes to target. Clear the operational area. Repeat, clear the operational area. Maya's breath came hard and fast. 8 minutes, not 10. Chen had lied, or been overruled. It didn't matter which. The result was the same. She had 8 minutes to cover terrain that required 12. The math was impossible. Maya kept running. Below her, the platoon had reached relative cover. She could see them now, small figures moving through a boulder field that would shield them from the worst of the blast. Captain Harrison was waving them forward, urging speed without panic. Professional until the end. One figure separated from the group. Younger. Moving wrong. Not away from the ridge, but toward it. Maya's scope was packed away, but she didn't need magnification to recognize the shape. Corporal Jimmy Torres. She had seen his file during mission briefing. 23 years old. Sister had served in Maya's company 2 years ago. Sarah Torres. Good soldier. Better person. Jimmy was running toward the ridge. Running toward her. Maya keyed her radio. Bravo units, who is climbing? Static. Then Captain Harrison's voice, tight with stress. That's Torres. I've ordered him to stand down. He's not listening. Call him back. I tried. He says you saved his sister at Firebase Phoenix. Says he's not leaving you. Maya felt something twist in her chest. Firebase Phoenix. 2 years ago. A night that had almost killed her. Sarah Torres had taken shrapnel meant for Maya, pushed her out of the blast radius at the last possible second. Maya had carried Sarah 600 meters to an evac point while enemy fire chewed up the ground around them. Sarah had survived. Barely. Medical discharge, but alive. Now her little brother was about to die because of a debt Maya never wanted him to pay. She keyed her radio again. Torres, this is Sniper 1. Stand down. That's an order. No response. The figure kept climbing. Maya cursed and pushed harder. Her lungs burned. Her legs felt distant, mechanical. She was running on something beyond adrenaline now. Pure will. The kind that kept bodies moving after the mind had accepted impossibility. 6 minutes. The ridge behind her erupted in gunfire. The enemy had reorganized. They were advancing again, pouring fire into the area she had occupied minutes before. They didn't know she was gone. They were shooting at a memory. That wouldn't last. Once they realized she had displaced, they would track her movement, find her route, adjust their fire. She had maybe 90 seconds before that happened. Her radio crackled with a new voice. Older, female, controlled but with an edge underneath that spoke of decades holding back words that needed to be said. Maya Reeves. Maya almost stumbled. She knew that voice, had heard it in training, in classrooms, in the quiet moments after long days on the range when instructors became human and told stories they probably shouldn't. Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Vance, the woman who had held her father's hand while he died. Maya Keter radio. Gunny. I'm patched into TOC net. Unauthorized. They'll kick me out in about 30 seconds. So listen fast. Maya kept running, listening. Your father made me promise something. 24 years ago, I've kept that promise by training you, by making sure you understood what he couldn't finish. But there's something else you need to know. 5 minutes to airstrike. The ridge was steeper here. Maya had to grab rocks to keep from sliding. Her gloves tore. Blood slicked her palms. She didn't slow. Vance's voice continued. Fallujah wasn't just bad intel. It was deliberately bad. Someone wanted your father's unit to walk into that ambush. We never proved who. The investigation got buried. But your father knew. In those last minutes, he knew someone had sold him out. Maya's jaw clenched. Why are you telling me this now? Because I think it's happening again. The enemy on your ridge is too well coordinated, too informed, and I need you to survive long enough to prove it, like your father didn't. The radio cut to static, then a different voice. Military police. Professional. Final. Gunnery Sergeant Vance, you are removed from this net. Report to your commanding officer immediately. Silence. Maya was alone again. 4 minutes. The descent was becoming vertical. Not climbing, not quite, but close. Maya slung her rifle across her chest and used both hands. Her fingers found holes in rock that looked solid until her weight tested it. Twice stones came loose, and she had to catch herself, muscles screaming, before gravity could take her the rest of the way down. Jimmy Torres was still climbing toward her. Closer now, maybe 200 meters below. She could hear him, boots on stone, heavy breathing, the sound of someone pushing beyond training, beyond sense, into territory where only conviction mattered. Behind Maya, the gunfire intensified. They had found her trail. She heard rounds cracking past. Not close yet, but getting closer. They were firing blind, suppressing her probable routes, hoping to get lucky. One of them did. The round hit rock 2 feet from Maya's head. Stone exploded. Fragments tore into her left shoulder and neck. She felt impact before pain, then burning, hot blood on cold skin. She didn't stop. Couldn't. Stopping meant dying. 3 minutes. Her radio crackled. Colonel Chen's voice. Different now, raw. Like she had torn away whatever filter military protocol required and was speaking human to human. Maya, I'm at TOC. I'm watching the feed. You're not going to make it. Maya didn't waste breath answering. Chen continued. I'm looking at the blast radius. You need to be 400 meters from impact point. You're at 600 now, but you're moving toward the target, not away. Torres is in the approach path. If you meet him, you both die. Maya's vision was narrowing. Blood loss, exhaustion, variables compounding into an equation with no good answer. She could see Jimmy now, 50 meters below, face set with determination that looked just like his sister's. The same stubborn conviction that some debts had to be paid regardless of cost. 2 minutes, Chen's voice again, quieter. I'm going to do something. It'll probably end my career, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Maya thought about her father, about the order he had trusted, about the 12 soldiers who died because that trust was misplaced. She thought about the watch on her wrist. Do the math, even when they tell you to stop. Maya Keter radio. What's the equation, Colonel? A pause. Then Chen answered. The equation is simple. I can delay the strike by 60 seconds. Just 60. If you use it right, you both survive. If you waste it, you both die. Your call. Maya looked down at Jimmy Torres, up at the ridge behind her, at the sky where F-18s were inbound with ordnance that would erase everything in a radius measured in hundreds of meters. 60 seconds was nothing. 60 seconds was everything. Maya made her choice. Do it. The radio went silent. For a moment, Maya thought Chen had been cut off, removed from command, arrested. All the things that happened when colonels disobeyed generals. Then she heard it. Distant, growing, the sound that changed everything. Aircraft engines, but not the F-18s, something else. Heavier, closer. A UH-60 Blackhawk came over the ridgeline so low Maya could see the crew chief's face. The helicopter wasn't supposed to be here. Wasn't part of the operational plan. This was an airstrike zone, a no-fly area for anything except the jets carrying bombs, which meant Chen had pulled assets from somewhere else, diverted them, ordered them into an area they had been specifically told to avoid. Career ending didn't begin to cover what Chen had just done. The Black Hawk swung into hover 30 meters below Maya's position, too far to jump, but Jimmy Torres was directly beneath it. The crew chief was on the external loudspeaker. "Corporal, grab the hoist. Do it now." Jimmy looked up at Maya. His face was torn between duty and loyalty, between the direct order he was hearing and the debt he believed he owed. Maya keyed her radio. "Torres, get on that helicopter. That's not a request." Jimmy shook his head. "Not without you." 90 seconds to impact. Maya felt something break inside her, not physically, somewhere deeper. The place where she had kept herself separate from the soldiers she protected. The distance that let her do the math without calculating the cost in faces, in names, in sisters who would grieve. That distance collapsed. She keyed her radio one more time. "Jimmy, your sister saved my life. Don't make me carry your death the way I've carried that debt, please." The word "please" did it. Broke through. Jimmy's face changed. Acceptance, resignation, grief for a debt unpaid. He grabbed the hoist. The Black Hawk lifted him. Fast, professional. They had maybe 40 seconds before they had to clear the blast radius. The crew chief's voice came through the radio. "Sniper, we can't hold position. You need to move faster." Maya was already moving. Faster than safe. Faster than possible. Sliding more than climbing. Her hands were shredded. Blood on every handhold. She could feel things tearing. Tendons, ligaments, the small structural elements that held a body together. She didn't care. Pain was just information. Information could be processed later. 60 seconds. The Black Hawk was climbing, banking, getting Jimmy clear. Maya could see his face through the open door. He was screaming something. The wind tore away the words, but she could read his lips. "I'm sorry." Maya hit flat ground. The impact jarred every bone in her body. She rolled, came up running. The terrain here was different. Exposed, open, no cover, just loose gravel and thin scrub, and 400 meters between her and relative safety. 45 seconds. Her legs were moving, but they felt wrong, disconnected, like she was operating them remotely. Each step was deliberate, conscious, no autopilot left. The F-18s were audible now, not just distant engine noise, but the specific sound of aircraft in attack approach. Fast. Automated, loaded with precision munitions that would turn the ridge behind her into a crater. 30 seconds. Maya could see the boulder field ahead, the same cover that had saved the platoon. She could see figures there, soldiers, watching. Some had cameras raised, recording. They would document this moment, her death or her survival. One more piece of footage that would get classified and buried and forgotten by everyone except the people who had been there. 20 seconds. Her boot caught on something. A root. A rock. It didn't matter. She went down hard. Face first. Skidding. Gravel tearing through uniform into skin. She tried to get up. Her legs wouldn't cooperate. Wouldn't take her weight. 15 seconds. Hands grabbed her. Multiple sets. She was being dragged. Lifted. Carried. She couldn't see faces. Just uniforms. Rank insignia. Blood that might have been hers or theirs. 10 seconds. They threw her behind a boulder twice her height. Bodies piled on top of her. Human shields. A final equation. If the blast was close enough, they would all die. If it was far enough, the boulder would protect them. 5 seconds. Maya tried to object. Tried to tell them not to cover her. She was the one who should absorb the blast. The one who had made the choices that led here. But her voice didn't work. Everything was shutting down. Systems preserving essential functions. Everything else could wait. 4 seconds. 3, 2, 1. The world ended. Not dramatically. Not with the fire and fury that movies promised. The blast was pressure first. A wall of force that hit like being underwater when a depth charge detonates. Then sound. So loud it bypassed ears entirely and resonated in bone, in organs, in the fluid around her brain. Then light. White. Absolute. Then nothing. Maya woke to silence. Not real silence. Her ears were ringing with a high-pitched whine that would last for days. But silence compared to the noise before. Absence instead of presence. She was alive. That was unexpected. She tried to move. Her body informed her this was a poor decision. She ignored the feedback and sat up anyway. The soldiers who had covered her were sprawling around the boulder, stunned but breathing. One was bleeding from his nose. Another was vomiting. Normal responses to overpressure. Nothing fatal. Maya looked back at the ridge. It wasn't there anymore. Not the way it had been. The entire upper section had been reshaped. Smooth stone was now rubble. The narrow paths she had used were gone. Everything she had fought to hold had been erased in 5 seconds of precision violence. But the platoon was intact. 40 soldiers, all alive, some injured, none dead. The equation had worked. Her radio crackled. Weak, damaged, but functional. Maya, Chen's voice, barely audible. Are you alive? Maya tried to key her radio. Her hand was shaking too hard. It took 3 attempts. Yes. Good. Chen's voice was flat, emotionless. The tone of someone who had burned through every other option and had landed on exhaustion. Because you're going to need to be. For what comes next. Maya looked around. Soldiers were starting to move, checking each other, professional recovery protocols. But they were also looking at her. Not with hostility, not exactly. Something else. Recognition, understanding. The knowledge that she had done something that would follow her. What comes next, Maya asked. Chen's answer was simple. The truth. The debrief happened in stages. First, the immediate medical evacuation. Maya's shoulder required 18 stitches. Her hands required more. The medics found tissue damage in both knees, stress fractures in 3 ribs, signs of severe dehydration, and blood loss that should have incapacitated her hours ago. She walked out of the field hospital under her own power 6 hours later. Captain Derek Harrison was waiting outside. He looked older than he had that morning. Combat did that sometimes, added years and hours. He didn't salute. They were beyond that now. You saved 40 lives today, he said. Maya leaned against the wall. She was still wearing borrowed fatigues. Her uniform had been cut off in the hospital. 40 lives. Did you count the enemy we killed? Harrison's face went carefully neutral. That's not the same calculation. Why not? They're dead because I pulled a trigger. Their families won't see them again. The math should include them. Harrison considered this, then shook his head. The math that matters is this. My soldiers are alive because of your choices. That's what I'll testify to. Testify, the word hung between them. There's going to be an inquiry, Harrison continued. Colonel Chen diverted air assets without authorization. Delayed a strike. Violated about 15 protocols. They're going to want answers. And those answers start with you. Maya closed her eyes. Of course there would be an inquiry. There was always an inquiry. Her father's death had generated a 300-page report that concluded everything was done correctly and no one was at fault. 40 soldiers lived because of decisions that violated protocol. That was the problem. The system was built to process success and failure in specific ways. Anything outside those parameters became a threat to the system itself. When? Maya asked. 72 hours, maybe less. They'll fly you back to main base. Harrison paused. For what it's worth, every soldier in that platoon will testify you made the right call. Will that matter? Harrison's silence was answer enough. Then Maya spent the next 2 days in administrative limbo. Not exactly confined, not exactly free. She stayed in a small room near TOC, ate in an empty mess hall, avoided eye contact with officers who didn't know whether to thank her or arrest her. On the second day, someone knocked. Maya opened the door to find Jimmy Torres. He looked worse than she felt. Guilt had a way of doing that, eating from the inside. Can I come in? Maya stepped aside. Jimmy entered and stood awkwardly in the center of the small room. He was holding something. A letter. Worn envelope. Old. My sister wrote this, he said, 2 years ago, after Firebase Phoenix. She wanted to give it to you, but she got medevac before she could. So she gave it to me, told me to deliver it if I ever met you. He held out the envelope. Maya took it. The paper was soft with handling, Sarah's handwriting on the front. Staff Sergeant Maya Reeves, nothing else. You can read it, Jimmy said. I'll wait outside. He left before Maya could respond. She sat on the edge of her bunk and opened the envelope. The letter inside was short, 2 paragraphs. Sarah Torres had never been one for excess words. The first paragraph was simple. Thank you for carrying me. Thank you for not leaving me. Thank you for ignoring the lieutenant who ordered you to fall back. You saved my life by disobeying an order. I'll never forget that. The second paragraph was different. My little brother wants to be like me, wants to serve. I'm terrified he'll find himself in a situation where he has to choose between duty and doing what's right. If that happens, I hope he has someone like you nearby, someone who knows the difference, someone who will show him that courage isn't blind obedience. It's calculated defiance. Maya read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. She opened the door. Jimmy was leaning against the wall outside, trying to look casual and failing. "Your sister's a good writer," Maya said. Jimmy straightened. "She wanted me to tell you something else. Something she couldn't write down." Maya waited. "She said you carried more than her body that night. You carried her doubt. She'd been questioning herself for months, wondering if she was good enough, strong enough, brave enough. Then she saw you make that choice, saw you calculate the risk and take it anyway. It changed something in her." Jimmy's voice cracked slightly. "She said you gave her permission to trust herself, to believe that sometimes the system is wrong and individual judgment is right. That's what I saw on that ridge yesterday. That's what you gave to 40 people." Maya felt something tight in her chest loosen. "Not much, but enough. Thank you for telling me." Jimmy nodded. He started to leave, then turned back. "One more thing. That equation you were solving, your father's equation." Maya tensed. "How do you know about that?" "Word gets around. Soldiers talk." He paused. "Did you solve it?" Maya thought about the ridge, about the watch on her wrist, about her father's last words translated through Patricia Vance's memory. "Finish what I couldn't." "Yeah," Maya said quietly. "I think I did." "Ma." The summons came on the third day. Report to TOC, main briefing room. Full dress uniform required. Maya didn't own a dress uniform anymore. The one she'd arrived in was blood-stained and torn. She borrowed one from supply. It fit poorly, but it was regulation. That would have to be enough. The briefing room was full. More officers than Maya had seen in one place since basic training. Captain Harrison was there, standing near the back. Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Vance was there, in civilian clothes, technically retired, but somehow present anyway. At the head of the room, behind a long table, sat 3 colonels and 1 brigadier general. Colonel Sarah Chen was not among them. She was standing to the side alone, not part of the panel, but not part of the audience either. Maya entered and stood at attention. The general spoke first. "Staff Sergeant Maya Reeves, you're here because your actions 3 days ago require explanation. We've reviewed the after-action reports. We've interviewed witnesses. But we need to hear your account directly." Maya kept her eyes forward. "Yes, sir." The general leaned back. His nameplate read Braddock. He looked tired, like a man who had spent decades managing problems and had run out of patience for new ones. "Tell me, Sergeant, when you received the order to fall back, why didn't you comply?" Maya had spent 3 days preparing for this question. She had rehearsed answers, tactical justifications, technical explanations. She discarded all of them. "Because the math said my father was right, sir." Silence. The kind that meant she had said something unexpected. "Explain." Maya took a breath. 24 years ago, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Reeves received an order to advance on a target in Fallujah. His tactical assessment said the order was wrong. He followed it anyway. 12 soldiers died, including him. General Braddock's face was unreadable. "I'm aware of that operation. It was deemed a tactical success despite casualties." Maya's jaw tightened. "With respect, sir, survivors don't call it a success." The general's eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you questioning a command decision from 2 decades ago?" "I'm explaining mine from 3 days ago." Maya kept her voice level. "My father taught me to do the math, to calculate risk, assess variables, trust the equation even when it contradicts expectations. On that ridge, the equation said staying would save lives. It did. 40 soldiers are alive because I finished the calculation my father didn't." One of the colonels leaned forward. "You're saying your father made a mistake?" "No, sir. I'm saying the system made a mistake. My father was following orders. The orders were wrong. He didn't have authorization to trust his own judgment over his commanders." Maya paused. "I'm asking if we've learned anything in 24 years. If we've built a system that allows soldiers to question bad intel, or if we're still requiring them to die for other people's errors." The room went very quiet. General Braddock studied Maya for a long moment. His expression gave nothing away. Then he looked at Colonel Chen. "Colonel, you have something to add?" Chen stepped forward. She looked diminished somehow, smaller, like confession had physical weight. "Yes, sir, I do." She placed a folder on the table. Thick, official seals, classification markings. "This is my report from Fallujah. The real one, not the version that was published. In this report, I detail how I pushed Lieutenant Colonel Reeves to advance despite his objections, how I prioritized timeline over tactical assessment, how 12 soldiers died because I trusted bad intelligence from higher command." She paused. This report was classified, buried. I was told to rewrite it, to remove any suggestion of command failure. I complied. For 24 years, I've lived with that choice. Chen's voice was steady, but Maya could hear the cost underneath. 3 days ago, I watched Lieutenant Colonel Reeves' daughter face the same choice her father did. And I watched her make the opposite decision. She trusted her tactical judgment over my orders. Because of that, 40 soldiers lived. Chen looked directly at Maya. I'm recommending Staff Sergeant Reeves be cleared of all charges. More than that, I'm recommending we establish a new protocol. One that authorizes scout snipers to override field orders when they have sufficient tactical evidence. General Braddock's face showed the first crack of expression. Surprise. You're asking us to formalize insubordination. I'm asking us to formalize tactical autonomy, Chen corrected. Our snipers are trained to assess situations from unique vantage points. They see things commanders in TL cannot. Sometimes they know things we don't. We should trust that knowledge. Or stop training them to think independently. The general turned to Maya. Is that what you want, Sergeant? Authorization to disobey orders? Maya considered the question. Considered her father. Considered the watch on her wrist. No, sir. I want authorization to trust the math. There's a difference. General Braddock sat back. He looked at the other officers. Some kind of silent communication passed between them. Then he spoke. This inquiry is concluded. Staff Sergeant Reeves, you're cleared of charges. Your actions are deemed tactically sound given available information. He paused. However, you will be reassigned. Effective immediately, no more field operations. Administrative duty only. Maya felt the floor drop. Administrative duty. It was exile dressed as protection, a way to remove her from combat without admitting the system couldn't handle her. Sir, I request to remain in the field. Request denied. The general's voice was final. You're too valuable to lose and too dangerous to deploy. That's not a criticism, Sergeant. It's reality. He stood. The other officers followed. You're dismissed. Maya saluted. The gesture felt hollow. As she turned to leave, Colonel Chen caught her arm, quietly so only Maya could hear. I'm sorry, I tried. Maya looked at the woman who had killed her father by proxy, who had tried to save his daughter, who had confessed to 2 decades of lies. I know, Maya said. Thank you for that. She walked out of the briefing room into bright sunlight. The base around her was busy with the ordinary chaos of military life. Soldiers moving with purpose, equipment being maintained, the machine functioning as designed. Somewhere in that machine, her father's mistakes had been erased. His truth had been buried. His final equation had gone unsolved. Until 3 days ago, Maya touched the watch on her wrist. Do the math, even when they tell you to stop. She had done the math. She had solved the equation. And the answer had cost her everything she had trained for. But 40 soldiers were alive. The math still worked. That would have to be enough. Administrative duty meant a desk, 4 walls, a window that looked out onto a parking lot where vehicles came and went with the regularity of a heartbeat. Maya spent her first week behind that desk processing requisition forms for ammunition she would never fire and equipment she would never use. The work was meaningless. That was the point. The Marine Corps had 1,000 ways to tell a soldier they weren't wanted anymore. This was one of the gentler methods. No discharge, no formal reprimand on her record. Just a slow suffocation of purpose until she chose to leave on her own. Maya understood the game. She played it anyway. Every morning she arrived at 0600. Every evening she left at 1800. In between, she signed forms and filed reports and answered emails from officers who needed her signature but never her opinion. She was efficient, professional, invisible. At night she couldn't sleep. The ridge followed her into darkness, not the violence, not the fear, those she could process. What followed her was the quiet. The moment after the blast, when she had looked back and seen nothing where something had been. The absence that proved presence. The void that made the 40 lives real. On the 8th day, someone knocked on her office door. Maya looked up from a supply manifest. The door opened before she could respond. The man who entered was in his early 50s, lean, gray at the temples, wearing a colonel's insignia, but with the bearing of someone who had earned rank through fieldwork, not politics. His uniform was immaculate, but his hands told a different story. Calloused, scarred. The hands of someone who had done the work before commanding others to do it. Staff Sergeant Reeves. Sir. The man closed the door behind him. Didn't sit, didn't offer his name. just stood there studying her with eyes that had seen too much and remembered all of it. I'm Lieutenant Colonel James Reeves. Maya went very still. The name was impossible, a ghost made manifest. She had never met this man, had only seen photos, old ones. Her father standing next to a younger officer. Brothers in uniform and in blood. Her uncle. You're Michael's brother, Maya said. James nodded once. I know we've never met. That was deliberate. After your father died, I made a choice. I could be part of your life and risk influencing your decisions. Or I could stay away and let you find your own path. Maya's hands were flat on the desk, steady by force of will. You stayed away. I did. James's voice was level, unapologetic. Because I knew what you would become. I knew you would join. Knew you would choose sniper training. Knew you would end up in a situation exactly like Ridge 437. How? Because that's what our family does. We calculate. We question. We see the math that others ignore. And eventually we face a moment where the math contradicts orders. James paused. Your father faced that moment and chose wrong. You faced it and chose right. That's why I'm here. Maya felt something cold settle in her chest. Why now? Why not after the inquiry? Because the inquiry was theater. The real decisions are being made now, in rooms you'll never see, by people who are deciding what to do about the problem you have created. I saved 40 soldiers. Yes. And in doing so, you proved the system failed. James moved to the window, looked out at the parking lot, at the ordinary machinery of military life. You proved that a staff sergeant with a rifle can make better tactical decisions than colonels with satellites and drones and real-time intelligence. That's not a win for the Marine Corps. That's an existential threat. Maya stood, walked around the desk, faced her uncle. What do you want? James turned from the window. The truth about Fallujah, about what really happened to your father. Colonel Chen already confessed. Chen confessed to her part. James's voice was hard. But there's more. Your father wasn't killed by bad intelligence. He was killed by deliberate intelligence. Someone wanted his unit to walk into that ambush. Someone with access to operational plans and enemy contacts. Maya felt her breath catch. You're saying there was a traitor. I'm saying there was a transaction. James pulled a slim folder from inside his jacket. Classified, sealed, 24 years of investigation compressed into 40 pages. I've spent my entire career building this case, piece by piece, interview by interview. Every transfer I took, every assignment I accepted, it was positioning, getting closer to the people who knew. He held out the folder. Maya didn't take it. If you've had this for 24 years, why didn't you release it? Because I couldn't prove it. Not definitively. James's jaw tightened. The people involved were too high-ranking, too protected. Every time I got close, evidence would disappear. Witnesses would recant. Files would be classified above my clearance level. Then why give it to me now? Because Ridge 437 changed the equation. James set the folder on Maya's desk. You didn't just save 40 soldiers. You created a precedent, a proof of concept. You showed that individual judgment can override command structure when the command structure is compromised. That's leverage. Against who? James was quiet for a moment. Then he said a name. Brigadier General Marcus Aldrich. Maya recognized it. She had seen that name on briefing documents, operational orders. The general had been mentioned during her inquiry, but only in passing, a signature at the bottom of authorization forms. Aldrich was a major in 2004, James continued. He was responsible for intelligence coordination in Fallujah. Your father's unit was operating on intel that Aldrich personally vetted and approved. Intel that was wrong, deliberately wrong. Why would he do that? Money. James's voice was flat, empty of emotion. Aldrich was being paid by a contractor named Brian Kozlowski, former Special Forces, discharged for excessive force. Kozlowski had connections to local militia groups. He was selling information both ways. Aldrich fed him our operational plans. Kozlowski fed enemy forces our movements. Maya's hands were shaking. She pressed them against the desk. My father died so a contractor could make money? 12 soldiers died, James corrected. Your father just happens to be the one we remember. He paused. Kozlowski disappeared after Fallujah. Went dark. We assumed he was dead or hiding in some third world country under a new name. Assumed? 3 days ago we found him. Maya's vision narrowed. Found him where? In country. Operating as a security consultant. James pulled out a second document. This one had photos, surveillance images, a man in tactical gear. Older now, weathered, but unmistakable. Your ridge was compromised because Kozlowski is still selling information, still getting soldiers killed for profit. Maya stared at the photo. This man was responsible for her father's death, for 12 deaths, for 24 years of lies. And he was still out there, still operating, still killing. Where is he now? Her voice was barely above a whisper. We don't know. James took the photo back. He goes dark between contracts, uses multiple identities, multiple bank accounts. He's careful, professional, but we're close. Why are you telling me this? Because I need your help. James met her eyes. I'm chief of staff at the Pentagon. I have resources, authority, but I can't move against Aldrich without proof that will survive political pressure. I need evidence that connects him to Kozlowski. That proves the pattern didn't end in Fallujah. And you think I can get that evidence? I think you already have it. James gestured to the folder. Ridge 437 was too well coordinated. Enemy forces knew your positions, knew your extraction routes. That information came from somewhere, someone with access to operational plans, someone who is still selling to Kozlowski. Maya picked up the folder, opened it. The first page was a personnel file. Brigadier General Marcus Aldrich, decorated career, multiple combat deployments, awards for valor, the record of a man who had served with distinction. The second page was a bank statement, offshore account, transfers that coincided with dates of operations, amounts that suggested payment for services rendered. The third page was a transcript, intercepted communication, coded language, but clear enough if you knew what to look for. The target package is ready for delivery, confirmation required by 0800. That's from 3 days before your operation, James said. The voice analysis matches Kozlowski. The receiving number traces to a phone registered to a shell company. That company has financial links to Aldrich. Maya closed the folder. This is circumstantial. It's a start. James's voice was steady. With your testimony about Ridge 437, with Captain Harrison's statement, with Colonel Chen's confession about Fallujah, with this evidence, we can build a case. Against a general, against a system, James corrected. Aldrich isn't alone. He's protected by people who benefit from the status quo. People who don't want to admit the system can be compromised from the inside. Your testimony threatens all of them. Maya thought about her father, about the watch on her wrist, about the equation that had taken 2 generations to solve. What do you need me to do? James pulled out one more document. Official letterhead, Department of Defense, summons to testify before a closed congressional hearing. Maya Reeves would be required to appear in 72 hours. Tell them everything, James said, about the ridge, about your father, about the equation he couldn't finish. Make them understand that the cost of ignoring tactical judgment is measured in lives. And if they don't listen, then we've lost. James's voice was quiet. Aldrich will retire with honors. Kozlowski will disappear. And the next time a soldier like you faces a moment where math contradicts orders, they'll remember what happened to you. They'll choose obedience over accuracy. Maya looked at the summons, at the date, at the weight of decision compressed into a single page. I'll testify. James nodded, picked up the folder, moved toward the door, then stopped, turned back. Your father would be proud of you, not because you survived, because you finished what he started. He left before Maya could respond. She sat alone in her office, 4 walls, a window, a parking lot where vehicles came and went with heartbeat regularity. But something had changed. The cage was still there, but now she could see the bars. The Pentagon was exactly what Maya expected. Massive, impersonal, a building designed to remind visitors of their insignificance in the machinery of power. She walked through security, through corridors, through checkpoints where her credentials were verified 3 times by people who had verified them 2 minutes earlier. James met her in a waiting room outside the hearing chamber. He was in full dress uniform, every ribbon in place, every detail perfect, the armor of a man preparing for battle. They're already inside, he said. The committee, Aldrich's lawyers, his supporters. How many? Enough. James's face was grim. But we have something they don't. What's that? The truth. He opened the door. The hearing room was smaller than Maya had imagined. A long table at the front where 5 members of Congress sat. Behind them, American flags and the seal of the Department of Defense. To one side, a witness chair, isolated, exposed. To the other side, a gallery, 20 people, maybe 30, some in uniform, some in suits, all watching with the careful neutrality of people who had already made their decisions and were waiting for evidence to support them. Brigadier General Marcus Aldrich was in the front row. He looked exactly like his photos, distinguished, confident, a man who had spent decades building a reputation and intended to keep it intact. Staff Sergeant Reeves, one of the congressmen, spoke. A woman, early 60s, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Please be seated. Maya walked to the witness chair. The room was silent except for her footsteps, each sound amplified by acoustic design meant to make witnesses feel small. She sat, adjusted the microphone, waited. The congresswoman consulted her notes. You're here to testify regarding events at Ridge 437, specifically regarding your decision to disobey a direct order to withdraw from an active combat zone. Yes, ma'am. Before we proceed, I want to establish something. The congresswoman looked directly at Maya. This is not a court-martial. You are not on trial. We are here to understand what happened, to evaluate whether current protocols are adequate for the situations our soldiers face. Maya nodded. Understood. Then let's begin. Tell us in your own words what happened on that ridge. Maya took a breath, told the story, not the sanitized version, not the version that fit neatly into after-action reports. The real version, the calculations, the variables, the moment when she chose math over orders. The committee listened without interruption. 30 minutes, 40. Maya's voice was steady throughout. Clinical, the way she had been trained to deliver briefings. Facts without emotion, data without judgment. When she finished, silence. Then the congresswoman spoke again. You're saying you knowingly disobeyed a direct order from your commanding officer. I'm saying I completed a tactical assessment that contradicted that order. My assessment proved correct. Because 40 soldiers survived. Because the variables supported that outcome. Maya kept her voice level. The order to retreat was based on incomplete information. My position provided data that command couldn't access. One of the other committee members leaned forward. A man, former military based on his bearing. And you felt qualified to override command judgment? I felt qualified to report what I was observing. Maya paused. What happened after that was a series of decisions made under pressure with incomplete information. But you made those decisions, the congressman pressed. You decided when to fire, when to move, when to stay. Those are command decisions. Those are tactical decisions, Maya corrected, made by a scout sniper trained to make exactly those assessments. The congressman sat back, dissatisfied but not finished. The congresswoman spoke again. Staff Sergeant, I've read Colonel Chen's testimony. She states that similar circumstances occurred in Fallujah in 2004, that your father, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Reeves, faced a comparable situation. Are you familiar with that operation? Yes, ma'am. And you believe there are parallels? Maya chose her words carefully. I believe my father faced a moment where tactical assessment contradicted orders. He chose to follow orders. I chose differently. Because you learned from his mistake? Because I had information he didn't. Maya met the congresswoman's eyes. I had his death as a data point. The room went very still. The congresswoman glanced at her notes, then at James Reeves sitting in the gallery, then back at Maya. Lieutenant Colonel James Reeves has submitted classified documents suggesting the intelligence failure in Fallujah was not accidental, that it was part of a pattern of compromised operations. Are you aware of these documents? I've reviewed them. And what's your assessment? Maya felt 40 eyes on her, felt the weight of 2 decades compressed into this moment, felt her father's watch against her wrist. My assessment is that the pattern continued at Ridge 437. Enemy forces had detailed knowledge of our positions and movements. That information came from somewhere, someone with access to operational plans. The congresswoman's expression didn't change. You're alleging a security breach. I'm stating an observation based on tactical evidence. Do you have proof? I have 40 soldiers who survived because I identified and disrupted an enemy ambush that shouldn't have been possible without inside information. The congressman who had questioned her earlier leaned forward again. That's speculation, Sergeant, not proof. It's tactical analysis, Maya corrected. The same analysis that saved 40 lives. Movement in the gallery. Brigadier General Aldrich was standing. His face was carefully neutral, but Maya could see the tension in his shoulders. Madam Chairwoman, if I may. The congresswoman nodded. General Aldrich. Aldrich moved to a podium, adjusted the microphone. His voice when he spoke was calm, reasonable. the voice of authority addressing an unfortunate situation. Staff Sergeant Reeves performed admirably under difficult circumstances. No one disputes that. But what she's suggesting, what these documents imply, is a conspiracy that spans 2 decades, that involves multiple operations, multiple commanders. He paused. That's not just unlikely, it's dangerous. The Congresswoman waited. Dangerous how? It undermines trust in the chain of command. It suggests that soldiers should second-guess orders based on suspicion rather than evidence. Aldrich looked at Maya. Staff Sergeant Reeves made a decision that worked out. This time. But we can't build doctrine around statistical outliers. Maya felt anger rise, pressed it down, waited. The Congresswoman turned back to her. Staff Sergeant, do you have a response? Yes, ma'am. Maya kept her voice steady. General Aldrich is correct that we can't build doctrine around outliers, but we also can't ignore patterns. 40 soldiers are alive because I recognized a pattern. 12 soldiers are dead because my father didn't have that information. Aldrich's face hardened. That's an emotional argument, Sergeant, not a tactical one. It's both, Maya said, because tactics without emotion means we stop counting the cost. And when we stop counting, we stop caring who pays. The room erupted, not loudly, but with the contained energy of people who had been holding back reactions and could no longer maintain the facade. The Congresswoman raised her hand. Order. We will have order. Silence returned, reluctant, temporary. The Congresswoman looked at her fellow committee members. Some kind of silent communication passed between them. Then she turned back to Maya. Staff Sergeant Reeves, this committee will take your testimony under advisement. We'll review Lieutenant Colonel Reeves's documentation. We'll interview additional witnesses. Then we'll make our recommendation to the Secretary of Defense. She paused. But I want to be clear about something. Whether or not we find evidence of systemic compromise, your actions at Ridge 437 have already changed the conversation. You've proven that individual tactical judgment matters, that sometimes the view from the field is clearer than the view from command. The Congresswoman closed her folder. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your courage. And thank you for refusing to let mathematics become an excuse for avoiding hard truths. Maya stood, saluted, walked out of the hearing room with her uncle beside her. In the corridor outside, James stopped, turned to face her. You did well. Did it matter? James considered the question, then nodded. Yes, because now it's in the record. Now anyone who tries to bury this has to do it in front of Congress. That's harder than burying it in classified files. What happens next? They'll investigate Aldrich. Quietly. If they find enough evidence, he'll be forced to retire. If they don't, he'll stay until the next election cycle changes the committee. And Kozlowski? James's face darkened. Kozlowski is my problem. I have assets looking for him. When we find him, he'll face justice. One way or another. Maya understood what that meant. Understood that sometimes justice happened outside courtrooms. She looked at her uncle, at the man who had spent 24 years building a case against the people who killed his brother, at the cost written in the lines around his eyes. Thank you, she said, for not giving up. James almost smiled. It's what our family does. We finish the equation, even when it takes 2 generations. Leper. Maya returned to her desk the next day. Same office, same window, same parking lot, but something had changed. The forms on her desk felt different, less like punishment, more like preparation. She was still processing requisitions, still signing authorizations, but now she understood what she was doing. She was learning the system from the inside, learning how decisions were made, how resources flowed, how power operated when no one was watching. If she was going to change the system, she needed to understand it first. Her phone rang. Internal line she picked up. Staff Sergeant Reeves, a voice she didn't recognize. Male, older, formal. This is Colonel David Martinez. I'm calling from Marine Corps Combat Development Command. We've received a proposal regarding Scout Sniper Tactical Autonomy Protocols. Your name was referenced as primary source material. Maya sat up straighter. I wasn't aware of any proposal, sir. It came from Colonel Chen and Captain Harrison, jointly authored. They're suggesting formal authorization for scout snipers to override field orders when they have tactical evidence of compromised intelligence. Maya felt her breath catch. That's the Reeves Protocol. That's one name for it. Martinez's voice was dry. Officially, it's being called the Independent Tactical Assessment Authorization. Less dramatic, but the intent is the same. He paused. We're forming a working group to evaluate implementation. We need someone with field experience, someone who understands both the tactical and political implications. Would you be interested? Maya looked out her window at the parking lot where vehicles came and went with heartbeat regularity, at the ordinary machinery of military life. But this time she saw something else. Possibility. Change. The chance to turn one decision on one ridge into something permanent. Yes, sir, Maya said, I would. Good. Report to Quantico next week. Bring your gear. This isn't going to be a desk job. Martinez hung up. Maya sat in her office, four walls, a window, but the cage was opening. She touched the watch on her wrist, felt the inscription beneath her fingers. Do the math, even when they tell you to stop. Her father had started this equation 24 years ago, had died before he could finish it. Maya had continued his work on a ridge that didn't exist anymore, had survived to testify before people who held power over truth. Now she would finish what he started, not with one decision, but with a system that allowed others to make the same choice, to trust mathematics over politics, to choose accuracy over obedience. Some equations took 2 generations to solve. This one was almost complete. Almost, Quantico looked different through the eyes of someone who wasn't a student anymore. Maya had trained here 8 years ago, had run these obstacle courses, had fired on these ranges, had learned the craft that defined her. Coming back felt like visiting a grave of who she used to be. The working group met in a building Maya had never entered during training. Administrative, climate-controlled, conference rooms with whiteboards and projectors and coffee that stayed hot in thermoses. This was where policy was made, where decisions that affected thousands of soldiers were debated by dozens of officers who would never face the consequences of being wrong. Colonel David Martinez ran the first meeting with military efficiency. 12 people around a table, 4 lieutenant colonels, 3 majors, 2 captains, 1 gunnery sergeant, 1 staff sergeant. Maya was the staff sergeant. Martinez opened with a briefing, the Independent Tactical Assessment Authorization, ITAA for short. The proposal was simple on paper. Grant scout snipers authority to override field orders when they possessed tactical intelligence that contradicted command assessment. Implementation was where simplicity ended. How do we define sufficient intelligence? One of the majors asked. What threshold of certainty justifies disobedience? Martinez looked at Maya. Staff Sergeant Reeves, you faced this situation. How did you know? Maya considered the question. The room was quiet, waiting. I counted variables, she said. Enemy positions, terrain, time, probable outcomes. When the math indicated 70% casualties if we followed orders, versus 20% if we didn't, the choice became clear. But you didn't know for certain, the major pressed. You were estimating. All tactical decisions are estimates, Maya replied. The question isn't certainty, it's which estimate costs fewer lives when you're wrong. The room digested this. Some faces showed understanding. Others showed resistance. Change always meant resistance, especially when it challenged hierarchy. The meeting lasted 4 hours. By the end, they had agreed on nothing except to meet again. Maya left feeling exhausted in a way that combat never made her feel. Fighting an enemy with rifles was simple. Fighting an enemy with bureaucracy was something else entirely. She was walking to her temporary quarters when her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered anyway. Reeves, a voice she hadn't expected. Female, tired. Colonel Sarah Chen. I heard you're at Quantico, working on the protocol. Word travels fast. Chen made a sound that might have been a laugh. When you blow up 24 years of cover-ups, people pay attention. Pause. I'm calling because I thought you should know. General Aldrich has been placed on administrative leave, pending investigation. Maya stopped walking. They found evidence? They found enough. Financial records, communications, nothing concrete enough for court-martial yet, but enough that he can't operate freely. Chen's voice was careful. Your uncle's investigation is bearing fruit. And Kozlowski? Still ghost. But now that Aldrich is compromised, the contractor has lost his protection. James thinks he'll surface soon. Desperate men make mistakes. Maya looked up at the sky. Clear. Cold. The kind of day that made distance feel deceptive. How are you doing? The question seemed to surprise Chen. How am I doing? You confessed to 24 years of lies. Destroyed your career. Saved 40 soldiers. That's a lot to process. Silence on the line. Then Chen spoke quietly. I sleep better now than I have in 2 decades. That's enough. The line went dead. Maya stood in the middle of a path between buildings where officers moved with purpose. She felt unmoored, floating between who she had been and who she was becoming. The sniper who solved equations, the staff sergeant who changed policy, the daughter who finished her father's work. All of it, none of it, something in between. Her phone rang again. Different number. She recognized this one. Uncle James. Maya, his voice was tight. We found him. Kozlowski, in country, operating under the name David Brennan, security consultant for a private military contractor. James paused. He's scheduled to deploy to an operation in 72 hours. If we're going to take him, it has to be now. Where? I can't tell you that. Maya's jaw tightened. Why not? Because this is a military operation. You're assigned to a working group in Quantico. You're not part of the tactical team. He killed my father. He killed 12 soldiers, James corrected, and he'll face justice. But not from you. This isn't personal, Maya. It's exactly personal. Maya's voice was hard. You spent 24 years making it personal. Don't tell me to stay on the sidelines now. James was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer. The uncle speaking, not the colonel. If you come, you'll be putting your career at risk. Again, you've already pushed the system as far as it will bend. One more violation and it breaks. You'll lose everything you've worked for. I didn't work for a career, Maya said. I worked for the truth. If Kozlowski gets away because I stayed safe, then the equation doesn't balance. James sighed. You sound exactly like Michael. Is that a yes or a no? It's a grid reference. James rattled off coordinates. Be there in 6 hours. Wear civilian clothes. Tell no one where you're going. If this goes wrong, I'll deny I ever called you. Understood. Maya. James's voice stopped her before she could hang up. This man is dangerous. Professional. He's survived 2 decades by being smarter and more ruthless than everyone hunting him. Don't underestimate him because you're angry. I won't underestimate him because I've studied him. Maya's voice was cold. I know exactly what he is. A man who turns soldiers into currency, who calculates profit in lives. He taught me something important. What's that? That some equations solve themselves. You just have to remove the variables that don't belong. She hung up before James could respond. 6 hours later, Maya was standing in a parking lot outside a storage facility in rural Virginia. Civilian clothes, no identification. A truck pulled up. James was driving, alone. Get in. Maya climbed into the passenger seat. James drove without speaking. They left the main roads, took county roads, then dirt roads. Finally stopped in a clearing surrounded by dense forest. 4 other vehicles were already there. Men and women in tactical gear. No insignia, no name tags. The kind of team that didn't officially exist. James killed the engine. This is off the books. Completely dark. If it goes wrong, there's no backup, no rescue, no acknowledgement. I understand. Do you? James turned to face her. Because once we move, there's no walking it back. Kozlowski has killed more than your father. He's responsible for operations that got soldiers killed in 3 different countries. Taking him down isn't about revenge. It's about stopping a machine. Then let's stop it. They got out. James led her to the group. 9 people total, 8 professionals who had done this before. 1 staff sergeant who had spent 6 hours in a car thinking about what justice meant when the system couldn't provide it. A woman in her 40s stepped forward. No rank, no introduction, just assessment, eyes that calculated threat response in milliseconds. You're the daughter. Maya nodded. The woman studied her, then looked at James. She's a liability. She's an asset, James said, best sniper in her class, combat proven, and she has more reason to see this through than anyone here. The woman didn't look convinced, but she didn't argue. Brief me on what you know about the target. Maya pulled out a mental file, everything her uncle had shared, everything she had researched on her own. Brian Kozlowski, former Special Forces, specialized in unconventional warfare, discharged after an incident in Afghanistan where civilian casualties exceeded acceptable parameters. She recited facts, statistics, operational patterns, the way she would brief a tactical situation. Clean, professional, empty of the rage that burned underneath every word. When she finished, the woman nodded. You'll provide overwatch, long distance, the team will make entry. Your job is to make sure no one leaves that building except us. Understood. The woman turned to the group. The building was a warehouse. Abandoned officially. actually used as a staging area for private military contractors who needed to operate outside legal oversight. Kozlowski was meeting with potential clients, selling information, making deals that would get more soldiers killed. The math was simple. Stop him here. Stop him permanently, or let him disappear again and spend another 24 years hunting shadows. They moved at dusk. 3 vehicles, separated by enough distance to look unconnected. Maya rode with James. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say. The warehouse was exactly what the briefing had described. Industrial, isolated. 3 vehicles in the lot, lights in the second-floor windows. Movement visible through gaps in boards. Maya set up a position 400 meters away. Elevated. Clear sight lines. Her rifle was borrowed. Not her service weapon. Not officially issued. Just a tool for a job that didn't officially exist. She settled into the familiar rhythm. Breath, heartbeat, wind, distance. All the variables that made accuracy possible. But this time there was one more variable. One that had nothing to do with physics or mathematics. Purpose. Through her scope, she could see the warehouse. Could see shadows moving inside. Could see a man who looked like the photos her uncle had shown her. Older now, gray hair, but the same face, the same posture, the same casual confidence of someone who had never faced consequences. Her radio crackled. All positions check in. One by one, the team confirmed. Ready, waiting, execute. The entry team moved. Fast, professional, no hesitation. They hit the door with a breaching charge. The explosion was sharp, immediate. Then they were inside. Maya tracked the windows, saw figures moving, saw muzzle flashes, the distinctive pop of small arms fire. Someone was fighting back. Her scope found a window. Second floor. A man appeared, not running, not panicking, calculating. He had a rifle, was lining up a shot on the team below. Maya's finger found the trigger. Distance, wind, angle, all the math that had kept her alive, that had saved 40 soldiers, that had started with her father teaching her to count when she was 4 years old. This shot was personal. She took it anyway. The round took the man in the shoulder. Not fatal, intentional. He spun, dropped the rifle, fell back from the window. Inside the warehouse, the firefight continued. 30 seconds, a minute, then silence. Her radio crackled. Target secured, building clear. Maya didn't move, kept her scope on the windows, on the exits, on anywhere someone could appear. 5 minutes later, they brought him out. Hands zip-tied, blood on his shoulder where Maya's round had hit. 2 team members holding him. He was walking but struggling, fighting against restraint even though fighting was pointless. They put him in a vehicle. James came over the radio. Package secured, exfil in 5. Maya broke down her rifle, packed her gear, was walking back to the truck when she saw him. Kozlowski, being led to the vehicle, his face visible in the security lights. Older than the photos. Harder, but alive. Present. Real. She changed direction, walked toward him. The team noticed. Tensed, hands moving toward weapons. James intercepted her. Maya, don't. I just want to see him. James stepped aside, let her pass, but stayed close, ready to intervene. Maya stopped 3 feet from Kozlowski, close enough to see his eyes, to see the calculation happening behind them. He was assessing her, trying to determine who she was, why she mattered. You don't remember me, Maya said. Kozlowski's face showed nothing. Should I? No. But you remember my father, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Reeves, Fallujah, 2004. Something shifted in Kozlowski's expression, not guilt, not remorse, recognition, like solving a puzzle. The sniper's daughter. He almost smiled. I heard about Ridge 437. You've got your father's instinct for bad decisions. Maya felt rage rise, pushed it down, refused to give him the reaction he wanted. My father's mistake was trusting the system, trusting that intel was accurate, trusting people like you wouldn't sell soldiers for profit. Kozlowski shrugged, limited by the zip ties. Your father's mistake was thinking warfare had rules. It doesn't. It has economics, supply and demand. I just understood the market better than he did. How much did his life cost? Maya's voice was ice. 12 soldiers. How much did you make? Kozlowski was silent, calculating whether answering would help or hurt. Tell me, Maya pressed. I want to know what my father's life was worth in dollars. 50,000, Kozlowski said. Yuan. Per operation. Fallujah was the fifth operation I provided intelligence for, so about 250,000 total. Maya felt something break inside her. Not violently, quietly. The last piece of illusion that maybe there had been more to it. Some greater reason, some complexity that would make the betrayal comprehensible. But there was nothing. Just money. Simple. Banal. Evil reduced to a dollar amount. 24 years, Maya said quietly. My mother spent 24 years alone. I grew up without a father. 11 other families were destroyed, all for $250,000. Kozlowski met her eyes. I'm not going to apologize. I did what I did. I'd do it again. Because that's what war is. Not noble sacrifice. Not fighting for freedom. Just people making choices about what they're willing to trade. What are you willing to trade? Maya asked. Kozlowski smiled. Anything. For survival. For money. For 5 more minutes of being alive. He paused, just like you traded your career for 40 soldiers you didn't even know. We're not that different, Staff Sergeant. Maya wanted to hit him. Wanted to put a bullet through his skull the way he had put 12 soldiers in the ground. Wanted to solve the equation with violence. But that wasn't the math. The math was justice. Real justice. The kind that happened in courtrooms with evidence and testimony and due process. The kind her uncle had spent 24 years building toward. You're wrong, Maya said. We're nothing alike. I calculate risks to save lives. You calculate profit to take them. That's not economics, that's murder. She turned and walked away. James followed. Behind them, Kozlowski was being loaded into the vehicle. His voice carried across the parking lot. One last calculation offered to the darkness. Your father died following orders, he called out. You'll die fighting them. Either way, the system wins. It always does. Maya didn't turn around, didn't respond, because responding meant acknowledging that some part of what he said might be true. Instead, she got in the truck with James and they drove back toward Quantico in silence. The kind of silence that settled after violence, after confrontation, after meeting the monster and finding out it was just a man who had made terrible choices and would never regret them. An hour into the drive, James spoke. You handled that well, did I? Maya was staring out the window, at darkness moving past. I wanted to kill him. I know. James kept his eyes on the road. But you didn't. That's what matters. Is it? Because he's right about one thing. The system protects people like him and punishes people like me for refusing to play along. The system is changing, James said. Because of you. Because of what you did on that ridge. The protocol we're building. It's happening. Slowly, but it's happening. And if it doesn't, if they kill the proposal, if Aldrich walks, if Kozlowski gets a deal, then we keep fighting, James said. Because that's what our family does. We finish the equation, even when the math gets complicated. Maya thought about her father, about the watch on her wrist, about the 24 years between one decision and its consequence. How long do you think it takes, she asked, to change a system that doesn't want to change? James considered this, then answered honestly. Longer than one lifetime, maybe longer than 2, but every generation moves it forward. Your father started it, you continued it, someone else will finish it. That's not very comforting. It's not meant to be, James said. It's meant to be true. They drove the rest of the way in silence. Maya watched darkness give way to dawn, watched the sun rise on another day where the system was still broken, but maybe less broken than yesterday. When they reached Quantico, James parked but didn't kill the engine. What you did tonight, it didn't happen, officially. I know, but I need you to know something else. James turned to face her. You've proven everything you needed to prove. You don't owe anyone anything more. If you want to walk away, if you want to finish your term and separate, I'll support that. Your mother would understand. Your father would understand. Maya looked at the buildings around them, at the place where soldiers learned to be more than soldiers, where policy was written by people who would never face enemy fire, where change happened in conference rooms instead of on ridges. I'm not walking away, she said. James nodded, didn't seem surprised. Then make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Not because you're trying to save your father. Not because you're trying to prove something to a system that might never acknowledge you. Do it because it matters to you. Maya thought about 40 soldiers alive because she had trusted her math. About her father dead because he hadn't. About Kozlowski in custody because one officer had spent 24 years refusing to let truth stay buried. The math was simple. Some equations were worth solving even when the answer cost everything. I'm doing it because someone has to, Maya said. And I'm the one with the most variables solved. She got out of the truck, James drove away, and Maya walked back into a conference room where 12 officers would spend another 4 hours debating whether to trust snipers with the authority to think for themselves. It was tedious, frustrating, exhausting. It was also necessary, because this was where the real work happened. Not in firefights, not in dramatic confrontations with enemies, but in slow, grinding institutional change. One meeting at a time, one protocol at a time, one reluctant signature at a time. Maya took her seat at the table, opened her notebook, prepared to spend another day fighting a different kind of war. Outside, the sun was fully up, bright, clear, the kind of day that made promises about the future even when the present felt uncertain. Some equations took 2 generations to solve. This one was almost complete. Almost. The call came 6 months after Kozlowski's capture. Maya was in her office at Quantico, reviewing the latest draft of the Independent Tactical Assessment Authorization Protocol, when her phone rang. It was her mother. Maya stared at the screen for 3 rings before answering. They hadn't spoken in 8 months, not since before the Ridge, not since the fight that had ended with her mother saying things neither of them could take back. Mom. Silence on the other end. Then a voice Maya barely recognized. Soft. Uncertain. Nothing like the steel her mother usually carried. I saw the news about the trial, about the contractor. Maya closed her laptop. The trial had been quiet, closed proceedings, but somehow word had leaked. Somehow journalists had found pieces of the story. 24 years of cover-ups coming undone in real time. Yeah, it's happening. More silence. Then her mother spoke again. I need to see you. The words hung between them. Need, not want, not should, need. When? Maya asked. Now, I'm outside. Maya stood, walked to the window. Her office overlooked the parking lot. A single car sat in the visitor section. A woman stood beside it. Gray hair, straight back, 58 years old but carrying the weight of decades she hadn't lived. Linda Reeves, Army nurse, widow, mother of a daughter who had chosen the uniform that killed her father. I'll be down in 5 minutes. Maya grabbed her jacket, walked through corridors that had become familiar over 6 months of bureaucratic warfare, pushed through the front door into autumn air that tasted like coming winter. Her mother stood exactly where Maya had seen her from above, hands in coat pockets, eyes fixed on the building like it might disappear if she looked away. They hadn't seen each other in person for 2 years, since before Maya's deployment, since the argument that had ended with her mother saying, "You're choosing him over me, choosing a dead man's dream over your living mother." Maya had left without responding, had deployed, had nearly died, had saved 40 soldiers, had changed policy, had captured the man who killed her father. And through all of it, her mother had been silent. Until now. Hi, Mom. Linda turned. Her face was older than Maya remembered. Lines deeper, eyes carrying shadows that hadn't been there before. But when she saw Maya, something shifted, softened. You look thin. So do you. Linda almost smiled, then didn't. I'm sorry for not calling, for not being there, for all of it. Maya felt her throat tighten. You don't have to apologize. Yes, I do. Linda's voice was firm. Certain I was angry. At your father for dying, at the Marines for taking him, at you for following him. I spent 24 years being angry and it didn't bring him back. It just pushed you away. She paused. I should have called after the Ridge, should have called after the inquiry, should have called every day since, but I was afraid. Of what? That you wouldn't answer, that I'd lost you the same way I lost him. Linda's voice cracked, that I'd spent so long being angry I forgot how to be anything else. Maya stepped forward, wrapped her arms around her mother, felt the older woman tense, then collapse into the embrace, shaking, not crying, not quite, but something close. They stood like that for a long time, 2 women who had lost the same man in different ways, who had spent decades processing grief through distance, who had needed 24 years and 1 ridge to find their way back to each other. When they finally separated, Linda wiped her eyes, straightened, found the steel that had carried her through 2 decades of being both mother and father to a daughter who had always been looking for someone who wasn't there. Can we talk? Somewhere private? Maya led her inside, to her office, 4 walls, a desk, a window, the cage that had somehow become home. Linda sat in the visitor chair, looked around. This is where you work now? For now. Policy development, protocol review. Maya gestured at the laptop, making sure the next generation of snipers has authorization to trust themselves. Linda nodded slowly. Your father would be proud. Would he? Maya sat across from her. Or would he think I'm betraying everything he stood for? He followed orders, died because of it. I disobeyed orders, lived because of it. That's not pride, that's contradiction. Linda was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled something from her pocket. An envelope. Old, worn, the kind of paper that had been handled too many times. Your father gave me this, the night before he deployed to Fallujah. He said to give it to you when you were old enough to understand what it meant. Maya stared at the envelope, her name in her father's handwriting. Maya. Nothing else. I was going to give it to you when you turned 18, Linda continued. Then I thought I'd wait until you graduated basic, then sniper school, then your first deployment. She paused. I kept finding reasons to wait because I was afraid of what it would do to you, what it would make you become. And now I realize you became it anyway, with or without his words. You're exactly what he was, someone who does the math even when it hurts, someone who finishes equations no matter the cost. Linda held out the envelope. So here, 24 years late, but maybe that's when you needed it most. Maya took the letter. Her hands were shaking. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single page. Her father's handwriting, neat, precise, the penmanship of someone who thought in straight lines. The letter began without preamble. Maya, if you're reading this, I'm gone. The odds say I'll come home from this deployment. The math says I'll survive this war. But statistics are only predictions until they become history. So I'm writing this as insurance, as a message across time in case the predictions fail. By now you know what I did. You know I followed orders I knew were wrong. You know 12 soldiers died because I trusted the system more than I trusted myself. You probably hate me for it. If you do, I understand. I'd hate me too. But I need you to understand something. I didn't follow those orders because I was weak. I followed them because I believed in something bigger than individual judgment. I believed that if everyone made their own decisions, if everyone trusted only themselves, the whole structure would collapse. I believed the system worked even when individual pieces failed. I was wrong. The system works when it trusts the people inside it, when it allows tactical judgment, when it admits that the view from the field is sometimes clearer than the view from command. I learned that too late, but maybe you can learn it early enough to matter. If you join the military, and I hope you don't, but I know you will, remember this. Mathematics is objective. Orders are not. When they contradict, trust the math, even when it costs you, even when it feels like betrayal, because the only real betrayal is letting good soldiers die for bad decisions. Finish the equation I couldn't solve. Be smarter than I was. Be braver. Be willing to disobey when disobedience is the only moral choice. And if that gets you court-martialed or discharged or worse, know that I'm proud of you anyway, because you'll have done something I didn't. You'll have put lives before protocol, math before politics, truth before convenience. That's what being a soldier means. Not following orders, but knowing when not to. I love you. I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry I won't be there to see what you become. Finish my equation. Dad, Maya read the letter 3 times, each time finding new weight in words written before she was old enough to remember her father's face without photos to remind her. He knew, she said quietly. Linda nodded. He knew the order was wrong, knew the intelligence was bad, but he also knew that questioning it would put Patricia Vance at risk, would make her the scapegoat. So he followed orders to protect her. That doesn't make sense. Maya looked up. He died to save her career. He died because the system made him choose between doing right and protecting someone who couldn't protect themselves. Linda's voice was sad. That was the equation he couldn't solve. How to be both loyal and moral. How to protect individuals while serving institutions. But I solved it, Maya said. On the ridge, I disobeyed and saved everyone. You had different variables, Linda replied. You had his death as data. You knew the cost of obedience. He didn't. He only knew the cost of rebellion. She paused. You finished his equation because he gave you the answer with his life. That's not contradiction. That's completion. Maya folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope, felt the weight of 24 years compressed into a single page. Why didn't you show me this sooner? Because I was angry at him too. Linda's voice was barely above a whisper, angry that he chose duty over coming home, angry that his equation mattered more than his family, Angry that he left us to solve problems he created. She met Maya's eyes, but I was wrong to be angry. He didn't create the problem. He just died trying to fix it. And you finished what he started. That's not his failure. That's his legacy. They sat in silence, mother and daughter, widow and orphan, two people trying to reconcile with a ghost who had somehow become more present in death than he ever was in life. Finally, Maya spoke. The protocol is almost approved. The independent tactical assessment authorization, it goes into effect next month. Linda nodded. I read about it. They're calling it the Reeves protocol. Unofficially, Maya almost smiled. Officially, it's just policy change. Technical authorization. Nothing personal. But it is personal, Linda said. That's the point. You made it personal by refusing to let it be abstract, by putting faces to the math, lives to the equations. She stood, walked to the window, looked out at the base where her husband had trained decades before, where her daughter had trained years later, where generations of soldiers learned to kill efficiently and die honorably and follow orders regardless of cost. How many? Linda asked quietly. How many what? How many lives will this protocol save? Maya considered the question. Thought about Ridge 437. About 40 soldiers who lived because one sniper trusted mathematics over authority. About how many ridges existed across how many wars. I don't know, maybe hundreds, maybe none. The variables are too complex. But it's possible, Linda pressed. It's possible that your father's death and your disobedience will save soldiers neither of you will ever meet. Yes, it's possible. Linda turned from the window. Then it was worth it. All of it. The anger, the distance, the 24 years. If even one soldier lives because you changed the system, then the equation balances. Maya stood, faced her mother. Does it? Does one life balance 12? Do hundreds balance 24 years of grief? No. Linda's voice was firm. Nothing balances. That's not how grief works. But meaning can coexist with loss. Progress can coexist with pain. Your father died, that's true. But his death meant something. That's also true. Both things exist simultaneously. She paused. You taught me that. On that ridge, when you chose 40 lives over your career, over your safety, over everything the system promised you if you just stayed quiet and followed orders. You showed me that some equations don't balance. They just resolve into something new. Maya felt tears she hadn't allowed herself to cry. Felt them spill over despite training that said emotions were tactical liabilities. Felt her mother cross the room and hold her the way she hadn't been held since she was young enough to believe her father would come home. They stood like that until the tears stopped, until breathing returned to normal, until the moment passed from crisis to memory. When they separated, Linda smiled, actually smiled, the first real smile Maya had seen from her mother in decades. Come home for Thanksgiving. Mom, I don't know if I can get leave. You're working on policy now. You can get leave. Linda's voice had returned to its usual steel. And I'm not asking, I'm telling. Come home. Let me feed you. Let me pretend for one weekend that my daughter isn't carrying the weight of military reform on her shoulders. Maya almost said no, almost explained about deadlines and meetings and responsibilities. But looking at her mother, seeing the hope in her eyes, she realized that some equations couldn't be solved with logic. Okay, I'll come home. Good. Linda moved toward the door, stopped, turned back. One more thing. What? Thank you for finishing his work, for being brave enough to disobey, for showing me that his death wasn't meaningless. Linda's voice was steady. Certain. I spent 24 years thinking I'd lost everything. You showed me I was wrong, I'd lost him. But I still had you. And you were exactly what he hoped you'd become. She left before Maya could respond. Maya stood in her office, 4 walls, a desk, a window, but somehow the cage felt different now. Less like confinement, more like foundation. The place where she built something her father had started and her mother had finally accepted. She opened her laptop, returned to the protocol draft, read the words she had written and revised, and argued for across 6 months of bureaucratic warfare. Section 4.2, Authorization for Independent Tactical Assessment. Scout snipers are hereby granted authority to override field orders when they possess direct tactical intelligence that contradicts command assessment. Said authority requires immediate documentation and post-action review, but does not require advance approval. Simple words. Dry language, the kind of policy that would be filed and referenced and mostly ignored until the day it wasn't. Until some sniper on some ridge in some future war would face a moment where math contradicted orders and would remember that they had authorization to trust themselves. And 40 soldiers would live instead of die, or 12 would live instead of 12 dying. The equation would balance differently each time. The variables would change with each operation, but the framework would remain, the structure that said individual judgment mattered, that tactical intelligence trumped political convenience, that truth was worth protecting even at the cost of careers. Her phone rang. James. Uncle James. The court-martial board reached a verdict. Kozlowski. Life imprisonment. No possibility of parole. James's voice was carefully neutral. Aldrich took a plea deal. Forced retirement. Loss of pension. No prison time. Maya felt anger rise. Aldrich walks? Aldrich loses everything that mattered to him. Rank, reputation, legacy. James paused. Sometimes justice isn't prison. Sometimes it's being erased from the story you spent a lifetime writing. And the others? The people who helped cover it up? Under investigation. Some will face charges. Some will retire quietly. Some will claim ignorance and probably get away with it. James sighed. The system protects itself. But we made it harder. We proved it could be challenged. That's more than your father had. Maya looked out her window. At the parking lot where her mother's car was pulling away. At the base where soldiers trained for wars that would test them in ways policy couldn't predict. The protocol goes live next month. I know. I helped push it through. James's voice carried something Maya hadn't heard before. Pride. You did it, Maya. You changed the system. Not completely, not permanently, but enough that the next person who faces your situation will have options your father didn't. Will it be enough? James was quiet for a moment, then answered honestly. No, it'll never be enough, but it's more than nothing. And more than nothing is how systems change. One protocol at a time, one decision at a time, one soldier at a time who chooses math over orders and lives to testify about it. Thank you for everything, for the investigation, for the support, for spending 24 years refusing to let truth stay buried. Thank you for finishing what we started. James's voice was soft. Your father would be proud. Hell, I'm proud, and that's not something I say often. He hung up before Maya could respond. She sat alone in her office as afternoon light turned golden, as the base around her prepared for evening formation. As thousands of soldiers moved through routines designed to turn civilians into warriors, and warriors into casualties, and casualties into statistics. But somewhere in that machine, a small piece had changed. A protocol existed now that hadn't existed before. An authorization that said thinking was acceptable, that math mattered, that individual judgment could override institutional inertia. It wasn't revolution, it was barely evolution, but it was something. 5 years later, Maya stood in the auditorium at Quantico, no longer a staff sergeant, no longer assigned to policy review. She had separated from active duty 2 years prior. Honorable discharge, full benefits, a career that had survived despite every attempt to destroy it. She was here today as a guest, an invited speaker for Scout Sniper graduation. 68 new graduates, the latest generation of soldiers trained to calculate distance and wind and time and make split-second decisions that would determine who lived and who died. Among them were 12 women. Maya recognized 3 from her time as an instructor, remembered their questions, their doubts, their determination to prove they belonged in a field that had only reluctantly accepted them. The commandant finished his speech. Standard words about honor and duty and sacrifice. The vocabulary of military tradition. Important, necessary, but incomplete. Then he introduced Maya. Staff Sergeant Maya Reeves served with distinction in multiple combat deployments. Her actions at Ridge 437 led to the development of the Independent Tactical Assessment Authorization, colloquially known as the Reeves Protocol. This protocol has been credited with saving an estimated 217 lives across 14 operations in the past 5 years. The auditorium applauded. Polite, professional, the sound of people who knew they were supposed to appreciate something but didn't fully understand what. Maya walked to the podium, looked out at 68 faces that reminded her of who she used to be. Young, certain, believing that training was preparation and preparation was enough. She spoke without notes. 5 years ago, I faced a decision. Follow orders that would get 40 soldiers killed, or trust mathematics that said disobedience would save them. I chose math. 40 people lived. My career almost died. Pause, let the weight settle. You're going to face similar decisions. Maybe not as dramatic, maybe not with 40 lives at stake, but moments where what you see contradicts what you are told, where your tactical assessment says one thing and command says another. She looked at the women in the graduating class, then at the men, at all of them. When that moment comes, you'll have authorization I didn't have. The protocol exists now. You can override field orders if you have evidence, but authorization doesn't make the decision easier. It just makes it legal. Another pause, longer this time. My father faced the same decision. He chose orders, died because of it. 12 soldiers died with him. For 24 years, I thought he was wrong, that he was weak, that he failed some essential test of courage. Maya's voice softened. But I understand now. He wasn't weak. He was trapped. Trapped by a system that demanded obedience without providing tools for judgment. He did the best he could with the variables he had. I had one more variable, his death. That changed the equation. Let me solve what he couldn't. She gestured to the graduates. You have even more variables. You have his death, my disobedience, the protocol, the testimony, the evidence that systems can change when individuals refuse to accept them as permanent. Use those variables. Trust them. When you're on some ridge in some war, facing some moment where orders contradict reality, remember that you're not alone. You're the latest iteration of an equation that started with my father and continued through me and will finish with you. Final pause. Let the silence amplify. Do the math. Even when they tell you to stop, especially when they tell you to stop, because that's when mathematics matters most. She stepped back from the podium. The auditorium erupted. Not polite applause this time, real appreciation, the kind that came from people who understood they had just been given permission to trust themselves. After the ceremony, soldiers approached, asked questions, wanted to hear details, wanted to understand how she had calculated risk on that ridge, what variables she had weighted most heavily, how she had known. Maya answered each question with patience, with detail, with the understanding that what she was really teaching them was confidence, the belief that their training mattered, that their judgment was valid, that authority was not infallible. One young woman waited until the others had left. She couldn't have been older than 22. Fresh from training, still carrying the uncertainty that came with being new in a field dominated by men with decades of experience. Staff Sergeant Reeves? Maya smiled. Just Maya now. I'm not active duty anymore. Right. Sorry. The young woman hesitated. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you ever regret it? Disobeying the order? Even though it worked out? Maya considered the question. Thought about her father, about the ridge, about 6 months in administrative exile and years rebuilding a career the system had tried to end. Every day, she said honestly, because disobedience cost me things I'll never get back. Friendships, opportunities, the simple comfort of knowing I followed rules. The young woman's face fell. So you wish you'd followed orders? No, Maya's voice was firm. I regret the cost, but I'd pay it again, because regret is just mathematics applied to the past. And the math still says 40 lives are worth one career. The young woman nodded slowly, processing, then asked one more question. What if I face that decision and make the wrong choice? What if I disobey and people die anyway? Then you'll live with it, Maya said. The same way my father lived with following orders. The same way I would have lived with it if my choice had gone wrong. She paused. But living with a decision you made is different from living with a decision someone else made for you. At least you'll know you trusted yourself. That has to count for something. The young woman saluted, crisp, professional, then left. Maya stood alone in the emptying auditorium, 38 years old, former Marine, current civilian, daughter of a man who died for an equation he couldn't solve, mother to no one but heir to everyone who would face the same choice in future wars. Her phone buzzed. Text from her mother. How did the speech go? Maya typed back. I think Dad would have approved. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, at her response. I know he would. Come home this weekend. I'll make his favorite dinner. Maya smiled, typed back a confirmation, put her phone away. She walked out of the auditorium into autumn sunshine that felt like spring. Everything was changing and everything was staying the same. The wars continued. The system remained imperfect. Soldiers still died for decisions made by people who would never face enemy fire. But now there was a protocol, an authorization, a framework that said tactical judgment mattered, that mathematics could override politics, that individual soldiers had permission to trust themselves. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was more than her father had, more than she had 5 years ago, more than nothing. And more than nothing was how systems changed. One protocol at a time, one decision at a time, one soldier at a time who chose math over orders and lived to tell others they could do the same. Maya touched the watch on her wrist, her father's watch, the inscription worn smooth by decades of carrying. Do the math even when they tell you to stop. She had done the math, had solved the equation, had finished what her father started, and her mother had finally forgiven and her uncle had spent decades building toward. The answer was simple, elegant, the kind that made sense only after you'd calculated every variable and weighted every factor and trusted that mathematics cared more about truth than convenience. Some lives are worth more than rules. Some equations take 2 generations to solve. Some changes happen so slowly you can only see them by comparing past to present and accepting that incremental progress is still progress. Her father had given her the first variables, his death, his letter, his final request to finish what he couldn't. She had added her own, the ridge, the disobedience, the testimony, the protocol. Someone else would add the next set, another soldier on another ridge in another war facing another moment where math contradicted orders. The equation would continue, variables would compound, the answer would evolve, but the framework would remain, the understanding that some problems required 2 generations to solve. That legacy was measured not in monuments but in policies, that the highest honor was not dying for your country but living long enough to change it. Maya walked to her car, drove away from Quantico for what might be the last time, headed toward a home where her mother was cooking a meal that would taste like memory, where they would sit at a table and talk about ordinary things and pretend for a few hours that they were just a family instead of the keepers of an equation that had cost them everything and given them just enough in return to keep solving. The math was complete, the equation balanced, not perfectly, not permanently, but enough. And enough, Maya had learned, was the only answer that mattered. The end.